Hi, everyone. Welcome to Manna for Thought. Sometimes life has a way of making you feel like giving up. You've prayed, you've waited, you've cried, you've trusted, and yet nothing seems to be changing. But today, God says, hold on. Joseph didn't lose hope, he held on. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and forgotten in prison. But the prison wasn't the end of Joseph's story. God had a purpose for his life. So Joseph held on. David didn't lose hope. He held on. He had already been anointed king, but instead of stepping immediately into the palace, he found himself running for his life and hiding in caves. The promise had been made, but it hadn't happened yet. So David held on. Abraham didn't lose hope. He held on. God gave Abraham a promise that seemed impossible. Years passed. His body got older. Sarah got older. Everything around him said it wasn't going to happen. But Abraham continued to believe what God had promised. He held on. Ruth didn't lose hope. She held on. She lost her husband. Her future looked uncertain. She could have turned around and gone back, but Ruth kept moving forward. She couldn't see what was ahead. She couldn't see the restoration that was coming. All she knew was that she had to keep going. Ruth held on. And then there were the three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were facing a fiery furnace because they refused to bow. They told the king that God was able to deliver them, but even if he didn't, they still weren't going to bow. They didn't know what God was going to do. They didn't know how he was going to bring them out or if he was going to bring them out. And here's what gets me. They didn't know Jesus was going to meet them in the fire. They were thrown into the furnace, expecting the fire. But when the king looked inside, he said, "Didn't we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Lo, I see 4 men loose, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God." They went into the fire not knowing who was going to be there waiting for them. And somebody needs to hear this today. You may not know what God is doing. You may not see him. You may not feel him. You may not understand why he allowed you to be in the fire in the first place. But just because you don't see him doesn't mean he isn't there. Sometimes God doesn't keep you from the fire. Sometimes he gets in the fire with you. And when they came out of the furnace, the fire had no power over them. The Bible says that not even the smell of smoke was on them. They went through the fire, but the fire didn't burn them. They held on. And finally, let's look at Jesus. Jesus knew the cross was coming. He knew the suffering he would endure. He knew he would be betrayed, rejected, beaten, and crucified. Yet Jesus held on. He endured because he knew the cross wasn't the end of the story, and neither is what you're going through today. Maybe you're in the prison like Joseph. Maybe you're in a cave like David. Maybe you're waiting on a promise like Abraham. Maybe you've lost something or someone and you're trying to keep moving like Ruth. Or maybe you're standing in a fire like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But today, I want to encourage you to hold on, because you don't always know what God is doing while you're going through it. You don't always know who's waiting for you in the fire. You don't always know what God has prepared on the other side. So if you're tired today, God says, hold on. If you can't see your way, God says, hold on. If the promise seems delayed, God says, hold on. If you're standing in fire and wondering where God is, hold on. Because the same God who was with Joseph in the prison, David in the cave, Abraham in the waiting, Ruth in her loss, and the Hebrew boys in the fire, it is the same God that is with you. So I want to encourage you, don't lose hope. God says, hold on. Thank you for joining me on Manna for Thought.